Good evening, everyone. My name is Prasanjit Datta Barua. I look after the tech, telco, auto, and health business for Facebook in India. It's my privilege to be part of this panel, and thank you to AIMA for having invited me to chair this panel. We have two renowned speakers that you'll hear from after this. Before we begin, I will just set some context to people. The theme that we're talking about today is reimagining customer engagement in the age of artificial intelligence. So something very close to all of our hearts of how we can engage with customers as businesses, as individuals, and make our business even more frictionless and therefore make it more profitable and useful for the customer. So I'll just begin with a simple chart on what AI actually is, just to bring everyone to the same page. So very simply put, artificial intelligence mimics the sensory ability, the comprehensive ability, and the ability to act that the human mind actually has through technology. So it takes up these three prime jobs that the human mind does and actually overlays this with the AI technologies, which are computer vision, audio processing, NLP or natural language processing, knowledge representation, and then finally the action is on machine learning and expert systems. And we've all interacted with some form of AI, whether it's Siri or your Android Messenger or your Google buttons and other stuff that you've seen. You've used it on Facebook, on WhatsApp, so you've seen all these use cases already happening, which are common use cases. The other use cases that are used by marketers very strongly are analytics, identity analytics, speech analytics, recommendation systems, and obviously data visualization, which is a very, very strong use case that this branch drives. A quick look at, in India, how AI adoption is looking at, and by adoption and future investments. This is an excerpt from the Niti Aayog paper, discussion paper, published in June 2018, and it's a graph by McKinsey. And no surprises, but financial services and tech and telecommunications is very high up there by nature of the businesses. And there are a lot of use cases that they are driving right now. Up beyond them is transportation and logistics. And then if you look down, there's automotive and assembly, energy and resources, media and entertainment. Travel and tourism is still lagging behind. And then there's a bunch of others, whether it's CPG, professional services, healthcare, construction, that are still somewhere in the mid. And there's a lot more work to be done there. And our panelists will be talking about all these opportunities when they come onto stage after I make the introduction. Taking off from these, the Indian government has taken 5 key focus areas for AI intervention, for artificial intelligence intervention. Healthcare, which is the most dynamic yet challenging sectors in India, has a huge, huge potential. However, it faces challenges in terms of quality, accessibility, and affordability. So how does AI actually help these 3 things come together and make healthcare more accessible, affordable, and high on quality? So a very, very strong opportunity and use case for AI. And we've already seen some early starts in this field, and there's much more to come here with support from the government. The next one is smart mobility, including transport and logistics. Another way where the government intends to utilize AI for safer modes of transportation and better traffic and congestion solutions to safer that. People from Bangalore will appreciate where I'm coming in from, and we have a panelist from Bangalore on this one. He'd give his right arm to solve the Bangalore traffic problem, I'm sure. And he is from that area, so I'm sure he'll give us some nice ideas there. And then it obviously technologies like autonomous trucking, intelligent transportation systems, travel route flow optimizations, etc., are under this field. Then there's agriculture, which is, of course, the lifeblood of the country. So the agriculture and allied sector that accounts for 49% of India's workforce. How do we modernize agriculture? So there are some examples of startups that have already started some good work in this. There's Intello Labs that is using image recognition software to monitor crops and predict farm yields. There's Abono that is using agri-data science and AI to provide solutions to stabilize crop yields so that there's less wastage and more efficient use of the land and the crop. Then obviously something we've all heard about, the smart cities and infrastructure, of how to actually learn from the past of how we've actually not done the best job managing our urbanization in this country, and learning from those and making sure that these smart cities that have been identified as benchmarks actually use AI to integrate and develop these into far more smarter cities that have learned from the past and make it far more efficient going forward. Finally, the fifth sector that has come in as a focus area is the education sector, which has the ability, and we all know this, to transform the country. Also given the fact that more than half the country is below the age of 25, we all hear about the demographic dividend that India has. So how can we use AI to actually power literally the education sector and drive India even faster up the growth curve? A couple of use cases that have been mentioned are augmenting and enhancing the learning experience through personalized learning, which AI can do very well. Automating administrative tasks, which take up a lot of time, especially when you're going broader. And predicting the need for student intervention to reduce dropouts. A big problem where people start studies but drop out very quickly. So how can you predict that and ensure that there's strategic intervention at the right time to ensure minimum dropout and therefore people completing their education versus dropping out in the middle? And obviously recommending vocational training for the right people and therefore skilling the entire workforce in a more relevant manner. The topic, like we spoke about, is about reimagining customer engagement using AI. So just to set the context before I hand over to my panelists, is AI therefore makes it possible to reimagine customer engagement in a few ways, like we can see right here. So one is it will help you anticipate customer needs far better. So because you'll have information about the person, there's data about the person, and more that you see now when you look at the app ecosystem that's already on all your phones. All the good apps already have your information and are almost preempting your ask. Rather than you searching for something, you're almost preempting an ask and it's sending you suggestions on a holiday, on your dinner out, and what have you. So this is a very simple use case I'm talking to you about, and because they know how you behave, they know how you interact with the app. Using that information, they're actually feeding back, learning that information, and giving you recommendations to make your next holiday booking, choose your next dinner spot, and various other use cases. So this is something that the apps are already doing very, very smartly. Allow marketers, therefore, to create highly personalized campaigns. I'm sure you've seen this either on Facebook or any other place where if you go shop at an Amazon, you come back, the same shoe literally follows you to that news ad unit. So it's actually making sure that you complete your user journey, even if some disruption happened, and therefore personalizing it, rather than show you the entire shop, showing you the exact SKU of the shoe that you looked at when you last went to the shop, saying, these are the pair of red sandals you looked at, ma'am, maybe you really want to buy them now, and give you a deal on that. So very, very personalized, therefore making very relevant for marketers and advertisers, and also for the consumer on the other side. Help sales teams quickly identify customer purchasing patterns. This is basically an offshoot of what I just spoke about. So therefore, you can build strategy around this and serve the customer better. Empower customer service representatives to deliver relevant actions and offers. Again, if you know more, you have enough information about the customer you will serve. The customer is happy because you don't start off with ground A. I mean, how many times do we have situations where you call a provider, maybe a telco or some other provider, and you've explained your entire use case of your entire problem to that person, and you say, sir, I'll just transfer you to the next person. And then you again start off right from the beginning saying, okay, now there's a problem. By the time you've done 3 of them, you're tired and you put the phone down. This will just make it simple. You state your problem once, or you don't even state your problem because you've behaved in a certain manner. Someone knows you have that problem and proactively offers you the solution. And just makes your life that more easier, gives you more time to do more important things than call up and follow up for something that's mundane. So that's another very strong use case and how customer service can really get empowered by AI. And then obviously the heart of all this, the data, the huge amount of customer data. So therefore, how do you actually sit down and analyze these vast reams of customer data, make sense out of the data, find patterns, and therefore, once you find the patterns, put an action plan to that, and therefore go to market with some kind of strategy. So that's another huge use case that AI can fuel. So I'm going to now hand over to Umakant and from Pi Ventures, who will talk about the interesting work that he is doing. And after this, we'll hand over to Nishith, and then we'll have Q&A for 10 minutes if you want to have after that. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, AIMA, for inviting me to address such a august gathering here. Very quickly, myself, Umakant, Soni, me and my partner, we co-founded Pi Ventures. It's India's only AI-focused fund, and Mohan Das Pai has been instrumental in getting our story going. And when he asked me to come over and speak about AI and how it's disrupting, organizations, I immediately said yes. It will be a pleasure because I think we need to build a robust ecosystem in this country, and the only way we can do it is when we have all the stakeholders contributing to it. So very quickly, what I'll do is that I'll try to take you through, how AI itself is evolving, because AI is not just one single word or one single event. It's also a continuum, right? And how it is impacting customer engagement, both on the sales side as well as on the support side. And then I obviously would like to talk to you about how we can actually create an inclusive AI ecosystem in this India, because without academics participating in this ecosystem, it won't be a very sustainable one. So just to give you a quick background of myself, I'm a graduate of IIT Kanpur. I started my career with Wipro. I was heading the technology strategy for Wipro BPO for some time. And I came across an interesting article by Ray Kurzweil, which talked about the fact that some of AI is going to be more than human intelligence by 2029. And I read that paper and I resigned from Wipro. I started one of the first AI chatbot companies out of India in 2009 and 10. When Siri also was not famous, and as you can imagine, we struggled to sell chatbots to all the banks and which are adopting it now. Maybe we were too early for Indian ecosystem. Then I spent some time in Valley, and I realized that we really need to create an ecosystem for supporting cutting-edge innovations in India. And that's when we started this fund. We funded around 7 companies so far. Some of them are leading AI companies, not only just in India, but also earning accolades globally. Sigtupal, Nirmay, you're going to hear these names very often as well. So without much ado, I will start to talk about, there is a nice picture actually at the back, and can anyone of you identify what this picture is all about? Amazon Go. So it's already, so this topic has been there, and good that you identified that it's an Amazon Go store. And you can see that there's nobody sitting there trying to check you out, by counting what you bought and billing them. All of that actually has been done with. So the idea is to actually make people feel that shopping is no longer a chore, but it's something that you can enjoy. And this store is already operational. So you can imagine that there is tons of artificial intelligence that has actually gone in to make that happen, right? And it is live. So that actually gives you an interesting understanding of where AI is today, right? It's practicable. It is getting used every day. Another story that I would like to actually mention is, and this is related to the theme of the topic today, is that disruption is the new reality. And there's a brief story I would like to tell. I mean, how many of you have been to London? Quite a few, right? You've seen these black cabs over there, right? And it's an interesting story, because each cabbie who's driving those cabs, they have to actually train for almost close to 3 to 4 years. They have to memorize around 40,000 routes with traffic information, which route is likely to be having a dense traffic pattern. All of that they have to memorize. And they were part of a medical study which actually studied their brain after they underwent training to become the cabbie in these cabs. And they saw that the posterior hippocampus, the part of your brain which actually does the memory storage part of it, actually became enlarged. And it could be possible that a lot of those cabbies actually have a bigger posterior hippocampus than quite a few of us. So that's an interesting part. It used to take them 4 years, memorization of 40,000 different routes. And it's an interesting case study. If you Google it, you'll find actually, it's a very nice article. It's worth 20 to 15 minutes of your time. You should read it. Because what happened now is something that we should all actually, check in terms of reality. So this is 4 years of training, memorization of 40, 50,000 routes, up to date, even forecasting of traffic information. All of that is available on the dashboard. All of our education is actually based on, 90% of that is based on memorization. At least that's what we've been taught, right? Now, imagine if all of that memorization to become actually superfluous in a second. Where would it leave us? So that's a reality, and that's a new reality I would like to welcome you all in. It's a reality that we are going to face, our kids are going to face, and so the only way you can face disruption is by adopting to disruption and figuring out where the opportunities are to take advantage of it. So I would like to actually talk about how this technology is developing, right? And what are the core changes that are actually taking place. And I'll start with the example that I just showed you. What's happening with Uber, right? So Uber actually demonstrates two major traits of AI. One is enabling extreme personalization at scale. So earlier we used to have personalization, but it was not at scale. If you wanted to get your clothes stitched, you actually had a tailor and who spent considerable amount of time working with you, trying to personalize the stuff. Today there is a company called Stitch Fix, which does it on scale, massive scale, right? The second part, which is the predictive part of the business, right? So I think the gentleman at the back is in a tearing hurry. So the other part, which is kind of interesting, is the predictive nature of business, right? And if I were to show you the next slide, which is very interesting. So every Uber driver gets an app which tells him where he should go so that his time on the Uber service is the most profitable. So they actually have these density zones which actually define them that, hey, where you are and where you should move to actually get the maximum amount of money for the time that you're spending. So every single business is going to be actually, one, be really, really personalized. Second, it will actually have prediction at the core of it. And all of this is actually getting powered with AI. And so that started with things which were actually connected. Now everything is getting connected. So that's the second wave that we are seeing. So if I were to look at every single enterprise, and I think quite a few of you actually consult with a lot of enterprises, right? So the first wave was when you actually had a digital workflow, which was separate from the physical workflow, right? So you worked on a shop floor, then you went and updated in the ERP what you did, right? Now every one of us is actually carrying a mobile in our hand. And what it is doing is that we are merging the digital and physical workflows. So everything is up to the moment complete. I have seen in last 3 years, almost close to 430 companies which are trying to apply AI as part of my job as a venture capitalist. And we found that most of the companies that are now coming in the enterprise space, they're merging all three. They're merging physical and digital workflows. They're merging the usage of mobile. They're merging the AI that actually runs on top of it to create both personalization and prediction at scale. The third wave, which is actually very interesting, because if you see how the investments in AI systems have taken place, right? So earlier, the database was the biggest point of investment, and that's where the maximum money used to go. Now, the money is actually going in creating the experience architecture. And this is something that we are seeing it across, not just in one vertical, we're seeing it across the verticals. And what does that mean? This means that 40% of the technology spent in enterprise is actually now outside of the CIO's budget, because that's where it is going. The customer experience decisions have been traditionally part of the CIO or CTO organization. It is part of CMO organization. And that actually is kind of very interesting because it is getting coupled with one more interesting wave, which is the wave that what we call as resource as a service, right? So we started with ASP, and a lot of you might have actually heard and talked about it and probably discussed in your case studies as well. Then we moved to SaaS, software as a service, right? Then we move to PaaS, which is platform as a service. And where we are right now is what we call as resource as a service. So anything, once it is connected, can be a service. We have funded companies in healthcare space, and we are starting to see adoption of that, where the devices will be as a service, right? There is a on-the-go pricing even there, right? So one is there is a technology innovation, which is that we are connecting multiple things. Second is the financial side of it, the business model part of it, where we are able to charge based on the impact that we are creating. And this is not just in one area, it is across the sectors. And this actually has implications. So if we see, what happened with this is that because you were actually able to deliver services on a software as a service model, and with that, even the smaller businesses actually became very viable customers. The cost of sale went down because you're able to sell on the web. A lot of innovations have started to come from the SaaS side. So there are SaaS companies which started out by selling it to smaller businesses. Zoho is a very interesting example. Google Docs is now a big business. So they were able to sell to the smaller customers, and today they are going after the big customers. So all the functionality got created with keeping the smaller customers in mind, and that is starting to impact the enterprise space in a big way. And this is just a detailing of that, like how's the cost of customer acquisition actually went down with the SaaS model. The wave 4 is that it's an interesting fact, but the CRM ecosystem has overtaken ERP in value. And why? Because a major portion of the enterprise spend is going after customer experience, because that, and I saw in the slide, presenter actually did before me, and I think it's very true. The customer is driving everything today. They are at the center of the universe. They are driving what kind of IT systems you have to build, what kind of financial systems you have to build, what kind of physical systems you have to build. They are at the center of the revolution. And whoever will not recognize this will actually get disrupted. And so I do predict that a lot of leaders that you see today, they will actually get disrupted. Some of the names that you are seeing there on the right-hand side, they will not be there tomorrow because they're not built for mobile-first workflows. They're not built with AI-first approach, and they actually have poor support for speech and text analytics. So today we basically used to think that speech and text analytics is like an afterthought, like it's like a cherry on the cake. But today it's the cake itself. It's no longer the cherry on the cake itself. So it's that central today. And so whether you say Oracle, whether you say RightNow, Avaya, Kana, they are the names in customer engagement part of it, especially on the support side. We will see all of them getting disrupted unless they acquire some companies or they innovate themselves. So if I really see from the engagement perspective, what are the hard problems to solve? First, sales process. Everything is going digital first. And from digital, the funny part is that your company is still offline, or there are a lot of processes which are offline. So there are a lot of handoffs where customers fall off, right? So you generate lead on Google, Facebook, on your mobile. Like every single customer or every single company that I talk to who's a consumer company, and I ask them, what's the percentage of your web versus mobile? And I consistently see this answer. 70% of that is mobile. 70% of the traffic is mobile. I mean, are there any entrepreneurs or you have companies that you consult with? I'm sure you would be seeing a similar ratio. Now the challenge is that all your tools or the workflows are still built for web. They're not built for mobile. And I can consistently see that the drop-offs are much more massive on the mobile side. And it's a problem that's not going to go away. You have to rethink your entire sales process from mobile-first perspective. And we are seeing it in real estate. We are seeing it in e-commerce. We are seeing it in healthcare. Everywhere the customer is on mobile, so that's where he will reach out to you first. And most companies aren't built that way today. Support process is just the other way. So earlier you could actually walk into a store and can get support, right? But that's actually very, very expensive, because that actually means that you are spending 2 to 3 to 4% of your revenue on support, which is a hard number for any customers to take care of. So what we are seeing is that, and these are numbers that we are seeing. So earlier, all the self-service numbers would be typically less than 30%. What we are seeing now is that they will flip to 70 to 80% of the equations, all the customer queries will be actually solved on the self-service part. So whether it is chatbots, whether it is you're automating the workflow, whether you are basically asking the customer to find the information themselves, it will happen online and digital. So we can see these companies which are probably going to, some of them are going to replace the companies that I shown earlier. It may be Oracle, but some of these companies would become big and they will replace them. And they're not only just in customer support, but on the sales and marketing side, we are seeing a huge disruption where the contextual sales is helping the sales guy. So you actually are doing a meeting, and on the meeting you actually get a tip that what you should actually talk to your customers about. And how many of you are using LinkedIn? Now LinkedIn actually throws up information about the person you're going to meet next, right? And it is across. So it's not just a dedicated software which is actually adopting it. It is getting adopted across the pattern. Even in the emails, there are some softwares which are actually able to give you precise information about what you should actually type in the email for you to get a higher conversion, right? Some of that functionality is right now available in Gmail as well, which actually does the prediction, and a lot of you have seen that. But what we have seen that it can be even more precise, which will allow you to chase down prospects and everything. So the big billion-dollar question is that how do we get there? Of course, AI is going to disrupt my industry. AI is going to disrupt everything, including the education industry. But how do I take my steps towards that, right? That's a big question. Of course, I get it. Different verticals are going to respond to change differently, and the impact will be different. And you have to map the customer experience journey or the engagement journey to figure out where you are, which part of you are, and which of the levers that you are going to push to get there. So if I look at media and entertainment, I think we are already there, right? So if you've not adopted to digital and AI first approach, you're probably already dead. And we are seeing that with Netflix and Amazon, which are tracking every single character that you are engaging with. So Game of Thrones was actually a great example of that, where they would kill the guy who's actually having the most sympathy from the audience, and that way they'll actually get way more engagement. And this is a perfect way to actually demonstrate that what the understanding of data behind that engagement could lead to. Today, all of their content is actually getting designed with that perspective in mind. So the hit ratio, which used to be extremely skewed, that there will be few hits. So the Pareto law that we used to, all apply all across is actually getting broken, because you have now way more knowledge about the context. And it is starting to apply across. We saw that in the long tail business of Amazon. It has broken through the 80-20 rule. And we are seeing that even in the Netflix part of it, where they actually make the most profit from the content which never used to sell. And they're able to sell that content. We are seeing the same thing in Spotify. So it's consistent across. And it's not just media and entertainment. Of course, where the digital consumption is there, it's easier to adopt. But even in terms of where the products are digital, but the acquisition is and support is physical, like financial services or telecom, now they are adopting chatbots. Now they are adopting, even on the sales side of it, processes which are actually allow them to support the digital scale. Whether it's in insurance, online retail, banking, travel, healthcare, auto. Auto was one industry which people thought about that the product is never going to become digital, but with the Teslas of the world, it is becoming digital even at a faster rate. And in fact, as somebody pointed out before me, I mean, how are we going to experience auto industry is also itself changing. So today, I have a car which I have not driven for last 1 year. I'm using Ola and Uber all the time because, in Bangalore, it probably makes sense to use them because, you don't want to be getting caught in traffic. And I think in Delhi also it's not so difficult. So across industries, we can see the impact that it's going to have. So what are the long-term areas that you could actually move the levers in? So if you actually have a customer set which is a higher life cycle value, there are 3 major areas that you can innovate. One is the customer experience engineering. So whether it is support, whether it is sales, you could actually rewire it to take in the new realities like mobile. The second one is automate process. I mean, today with the data coming out, you actually need fewer and fewer people to actually run that. And you could probably employ them or retrain them to be used in more creative areas. The third is every single design has to be done with the aspect of creating insight. So today, major way processes are getting redesigned are in a manner which will produce data about the context in which the process is operating. And this is fundamental, that you can't run away with it because the data allows you to actually innovate faster. That's the feedback loop that is actually becoming the smartest part of it. What is the opportunity space for a lot of you guys which are consulting with various companies I see there? One is that definitely natural language processing and vision, computer vision, is sufficiently advanced and they will become the primary interface on top of mobile. So first was the mobile as a revolution, and we all were experiencing mobile through apps. And I think they will change the way from apps to being operated on voice or being operated through the vision, which is just like a camera. So everything in next 2 to 5 years will move on to that. And that means that your customer service will be using bots, whether it is voice bots or chat bots. I think we will see a widespread adoption in that. We are already seeing authentication, which is based on facial recognition. And I think with going forward, you will adopt it at scale. Can you raise your hand if you are not using facial authentication to log into your mobile phone? How many of you are not doing that? So very soon you will be doing that. Because it will become just like clicking anything, right? It will become the natural way of doing things, and you will not even you will not even notice it, and it will become over a period of time. We are going to see things like LinkedIn for bots, Facebook of things, WhatsApp for bots. Machines will communicate, maybe 5 to 7 years, and that allows us to take a peek into the future wave. What's the future wave? Mohan in the morning, he was talking about the future wave, which is going to disrupt everything, and it's already here. In fact, this is a very interesting picture from how many of you can guess what it is about? What's the product in question? Tesla. Which model? Okay, I will leave you to Google the model part. But it's kind of interesting that the way they're actually delivering the customer support right there in the screen itself. And I see it will not be just screens. I mean, everything is connected. Every single object in that car is actually connected, and it is sending the sensor information back. Not only that, they are now doing the support part through the things itself. So you will actually have a washing machine which will tell that maybe my part is going to be broken, and it might shout that out loud, that please call somebody to fix it. And it's not very far. I already see startups which are trying to do that. So probably one of them will become big, and this will become mainstream as well. So it's not that far. So if I were to create a hypothesis on what this data-driven businesses would look like, and I believe that every single business today will be data-driven in 5 years, or it will actually become obsolete. It will today. No taxi guy can compete with Ola or Uber. Day before yesterday, I was actually having lunch with AI head of Ola, and we were just chatting about it. They have, so the entire road length of US is 4.2 million miles. And Ola drivers crisscross this length 20 times in one day. That's the scale of business. And it's all getting run with the help of AI. So today, if somebody wants to come and compete with them, they can't compete, not because they can't mobilize that much money or they can't mobilize that many cars, but the data which allows them to run, track, and incentivize their drivers is just not possible. So nobody can actually match the price point that they're working on, just because of the sheer data. And it's going to happen that every single business will be in that zone tomorrow. So we only have two options. Either we adopt to this disruption or we perish. And the choice is ours. Now, the second question which is there is like, okay, this is happening on a global scale. We do see some examples, but how do we actually get to create these in India? And this is a big question that I have in mind, because I do believe that there are 4 or 5 major factors going in favor of India. One, the data availability, right? After China, we have the largest number of smartphones, and every smartphone is generating 16x the data that a web is generating, because you've got 9+ sensors in your mobile phone. So you're generating tremendous amount of data. So India has the biggest amount of data. And now after the Sri Krishna Commission report, I think we will not be able to, people will not be able to track this data outside India, so they would have to come in and do something about that in India itself. Second is that there is a young adopter population. We will adopt business models first. I mean, I already have, and this is very interesting, and I'm seeing that socio-economic impact on it already. I have cousins which are traveling on Ola, which are refusing to marry because they have Tinder, and living in Oyo, and that's what they do, right? So they've got their life sorted around digital first, mobile first, AI first. And I think we are trying to adopt to that in some sense. The third biggest reason is the global talent hub. We have a huge amount of people, and these people can actually create, manage AI at scale. The challenge is going to be like, how do we train them? The fourth thing, which is actually often overlooked, is the data diversity. The sheer amount of diversity created because of the 5,000 years of existence in everything. From the food, we have more recipes than anywhere else in the world. We have more data diversity even in terms of, even if you say the caste, right, has resulted in genotype diversity at scale, which is not there anywhere else in the world. To languages, we have 22 different written and spoken dialects, which is not there across the globe. So we have a huge data diversity, and that's the biggest point that India has going for it. The challenge is that if we are able to leverage that successfully, we can actually create AI which could be the model AI for next 6 billion. So Silicon Valley is going to innovate for the first billion. We can innovate for the next 6 billion. So what we are seeing with our portfolio companies, we've got a few, is that they're not only applicable in India, but they are applicable in Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa. So imagine that your market may not be just India, but you could actually go across and have a huge segment to choose from. But today, what's the reality of AI ecosystem in India? And this is a sad reality, but we are not there in top 5 countries. That's the reality. That's where we are starting. We have a huge potential, but we are not there yet at all. If you just look at China as an example, in just 10 years, they've overtaken US in terms of writing the number of papers or filing patents. So, of course, as a venture fund, we have funded a few companies. They are some of the leading AI companies in the world. At least in India, they are. In some of the areas, they're also leading globally. Nirmay actually has got 7 published USPTO patents across the globe. They have. They're live. So Sigtopal is live, Nirmay is live, Locus is live. If you ever drop into Bangalore, you can actually get your blood tested by one of these as well. So there are a few examples that we've funded, we've nurtured. But if I really see China and what they have done and how they have done, I think we need to create ideas to impact Continuum for AI. Without that, we will not be able to create data-driven businesses at all. And as a nation, I see that as a moment of crisis. And I've been working with government, various parts of the government, trying to evangelize, make them understand that unless they connect all the ecosystems, from universities. Some of the ecosystem parts we don't even have, right? We don't even have a research park. We don't have a place where they can actually play around and, in kind of like an AI foundry. We are coming in at a VC level and we are funding companies where we are finding they're good enough to exist without us as well. However, we need to actually create a very coherent ideas to impact model for AI, especially in India. So we need to revitalize university ecosystem. We need to create a research park. I think without that, we'll not have enough depth in AI ecosystem. We need to create AI foundries. We are creating one in Bangalore. If you're next time in January, we're getting it kick-started. We are inviting 15 top AI technologists to come down and innovate along with us. There are 4 things you need to actually create really good AI company. You need talent, you need research, you need data, you need domain. If you don't have 3 of these 4, you'll get wiped out. There is no second chances here. So our idea is in AI foundries to actually get all of these 4 coming in and working. And we're also working with the government to give them grants to the companies that we start to engage with. It's early days, but I think it's something that we need to take care. Because this is an academic conference, I would also like you to go back and think about, like, how can you actually participate in this ecosystem? My email is there, my phone number is there. Please write to me, email me. I'll be happy to pull you in because as a nation, I think we have a 3-year timeline. If we don't deliver in this 3-year timeline, I don't think my kids will stay in this country. And that's the selfish reason that I'm actually motivated to work on this. So are you ready to join in the change, challenge the disruption, adopt to it, and win with disruption? Thank you.
Thank you, Umakant. We now have Mr. Kamath, who will talk about the legal considerations around artificial intelligence, which is also equally important, given the data and the information you deal with. So he'll talk about that now.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aaron. I'm a lawyer focusing on corporate technology, laws, and policy work at Nishith, Desai Associates. We're an international law firm, but unlike excuse me, I have a bit of a cold today. We're an international law firm, but unlike traditional law firms, we're also a sort of a quasi-university. We spend about 30% of our time studying comparative laws, publishing papers. Some of you have our papers lying on your tables, written by us. So we focus on various legal aspects. We focus on a lot of disruptive tech. We've written, of course, a paper on AI, which is in front of you, and data, of course. We've done a paper on driverless cars. We've done a paper on blockchain and the recent drone regulations as well. So that's just a small introduction about us and what we do. My role here is not to bore you with legal jargon or to take you through court judgments or anything like that. The intent here is, and like my co-panelists were saying, how do we go about the change? How do we bring about a good ecosystem in India, right, for AI? Part of that is law and regulation. Now, the intent here is to stimulate our minds as to what are the legal ramifications, some of the legal issues that have to be taken into consideration, right? And of course, I think as a general norm, technology continues to evolve at a very rapid pace. The law is always catching up, right? And this is one such case. But let's look at some of the issues, that we could be faced with. I'm going to focus, since this session is on customer engagement, I'm going to focus more on the customer side, the customer application of AI. I'm not going to focus on, the back end, the supply chain, and all of that. I'm going to focus on some of the customer applications and issues. Now, again, my co-panelists here and panelists before me, before the session, have already spoken in depth about the application of AI. And being far better experts than I am, I'm not going to add too much on this, but we all know, we've seen, there's education, employment, healthcare, customer experience, IoT, smart cities. We've seen all of this and heard the experts today. But I just want to put forward some questions, with respect to this. Now, we've spoken about AI in education, right, and how today it's used for a variety of things. But have we ever thought that when we learn a course, we learn perspective, we get sentiment to a particular subject, we get something called emotional intelligence to a particular subject, right? It's not just the information. Today, in fact, information is free. Information is very freely available. It's the value, it's the insight that we really want, right? How do you get that through an AI entity, right? And who feeds that into an AI entity, right? Employment. Now, even in the legal fraternity, there are a lot of talks, and it's slowly happening that soon AI will take over general contract drafting, right? That we do on an everyday basis, right? But can an AI entity argue before a judge in a court? That's something which the law has to evolve a lot. So does AI for that to happen, right? For instance, if you're dealing with a law firm, if you're dealing with anyone for that matter, right? A HR or a marketing firm, a law firm, any service provider, do you have a right to know whether the person on the other side is a human or an AI entity, right? Or do you just not need to know, being on the other side of the call? Again, healthcare. We read so many cases in the newspaper about recent issues with telemedicine, negligence, and while tech continues to progress, there are also related issues, right? What about misdiagnosis, right, over telemedicine? Are our regulations in place to deal with that? Also going to customer experience, it's all about data, right? I mean, again, one of my colleagues on the panel said that before you know you want to watch something, a digital streaming platform is already suggesting that particular show for you. It's reading your mind before you even know what you want to watch, right? That's the kind of data today that entities are dealing with, processing, sharing, retaining. So there are a lot of, and especially in the last year or two, we've seen, especially in India, that we've woken up to a stage where A, we value our data, and B, we want to control our data, right? It's not like how we envisaged 5 or 10 years ago, where we're just freely willing to give up data for anything without asking why, who, or what, right? Of course, there are a couple of other applications as well that pose legal issues. For example, we're talking about IoT, we're talking about smart cities, but then there's always a surveillance issue. There's a privacy issue, right? Can someone surveil, can someone keep track of what time you're coming home based on the time that you switch on your lights, the time that you switch off your lights, you put on your water heater, right? Can someone monitor your activities, right? And who does? I'm going to just, put some broad issues. Now, how many, in the audience here, how many of you all truly believe that an AI entity is akin to a human being and should be considered on par with a human being, should own property, have a bank account, apply for a loan? Does anyone here truly believe that an AI should be equated with us? You can raise your hand if you do that. Okay, I don't think many actually believe that they can be put on the same level. The law today is, of course, very silent on these things, right? As I said, the law takes a long time to catch up, is always chasing technology advancements. If we take Alan Turing's test, right, on what actually is AI, right? An AI has to have these functions: communication, internal, external knowledge, goal-driven capabilities, and creativity, right? But is that all? Today, let's try and understand that a legal person, right? The law addresses and deals with something called a legal person. Now, that legal person is not only you and me. A legal person can also be a corporation, an entity, whether it's a private limited company, whether it's an LLP, whether it's a proprietorship. They all have legal personality under the law, right? And how is that important for us? It gets important for us from a liability issue, right? Tomorrow, if there's something wrong, you have somebody to sue. To put it in very plain words, you have money to go after, right? You have somebody to put in jail, right? Can you do that with an AI entity, right? Today, our laws don't contemplate an AI entity being a person, right? The thing is, at least with corporations, they are anonymous, but they are fictitiously anonymous. In essence, a company or an LLP is operating through their partners, through their board of directors, through their shareholders, right? It's not always clear who an AI entity operates through, right? Of course, yes, there is a user, there is a programmer, but to what extent, right? Also, when we talk about, one development, one legal development that we've seen is that Saudi Arabia has given citizenship to an AI entity, Sophia, right? We appear to be, quite far behind in terms of even recognizing the existence of an AI entity under our laws, right? So that's something that's going to have to progress, right? Some of the arguments you can take against an AI entity being construed on the same level as us humans or even a corporation is that two main things. It lacks the responsibility and the judgment objection, right? Which means the responsibility objection is the responsibilities that we have, right? That we have to be on time, that we have to do a particular task and all of that, right? And there is a consequence if we breach that. An AI entity probably doesn't know that, right? It's probably programmed to do ABC, but not think beyond that as to what a consequence of a breach, or if they don't follow that, what it could be, right? An AI entity probably doesn't take that into consideration. One more thing is a judgment call, right? We go through most of our days dealing with people interpersonally, right? We take judgment calls, we have human sentiment, we have emotions based on which we take decisions, based on which we go through our daily lives. An AI entity has no such thing, right? And these are some of the arguments that have been put forth in the US and other jurisdictions as to why AI shouldn't be a legal person at all under the law, right? Now I want to go to another very simple concept. We've spoken about, of course, the online space and how AI is applied, through various industries, right? But what about contracts? Now, everyday business is only carried out through contracts, right? Today, with PDFs, with DocuSign, with clouds, we're able to execute contracts very easily with somebody sitting in the US, with somebody even sitting somewhere else, right? In fact, today, at least as a lawyer, we see more contracts are executed online rather than actually physically signed. I'm sure that's the case with you all as well, right? But what happens in the case of a smart contract where you do not have a CEO or a director or an authorized signatory on the other side, where there is no human element, any human consideration on the other side, right? For example, with chatbots, right? What if that same entity, right, mechanism had to sign a contract with you? How is that done? Is it enforceable, right? Again, under our law today, it's not. Why? Because the person, when I say person, I mean the AI entity, so-called person that you're actually signing the contract with, has no recognition under the law. Your contract is invalid, right? And that's why these are the things we need to be careful of, right? I'll give you a very simple example. Today most of us book our fixed deposits online on internet banking. And we choose the month, we choose the principal, it shows us the interest, and immediately it generates an invoice, a receipt for that fixed deposit, right? Now you can say that, because of the whole process is automated, it generates that, and that is a legally binding document by the bank, which is issued to you electronically, which is fine, which is perfectly recognized under law. But what happens where it's not standardized, where you have to negotiate certain terms of a contract, right? Where you have to negotiate either payments, where you have to negotiate termination, or how long the contract is for, then what happens, right? The person on the other side has no legal status, right? So these are the kind of things that we would like the law to develop and recognize. Obviously, these kind of things have not been tested in Indian courts. They have not been tested in most courts across the world. But it's something that we would like clarity on in order to facilitate the ecosystem that my co-panelists were talking about of an ideal system of where India should be moving towards in terms of AI, right? I'll give you a very simple example. Now, we talk about a person's competent to contract. Now the law is very simple in this, right? It's very simple law. A person has to be above 18. He cannot be a minor. He or she cannot be a minor. The person has to be of sound mind. The person has to understand the terms and agree to the terms of the contract. That's simple. Anyone can enter into a contract, right? How do you determine this for an AI entity? What is the age? What is the mental capacity, right? We also have a requirement that the object of the contract, which means the purpose of the contract, has to be legal, right? For example, if I make a contract with a gentleman for him to commit a crime or to probably steal from a person on my behalf, the object of the contract is illegal. The contract is illegal in itself. Now, what happens if I execute a contract with an AI entity, right? The AI entity doesn't know what is legal and what is illegal, right? Again, if it's something that's on the wrong side of the law, the whole contract falls down, right? And of course, there are certain other things. There's something, I mean, both people signing a contract need to be on the same page in terms of understanding the facts, understanding the law, and things like that. So this is on everyday contracts and going about business. Another thing, that I want to talk about is ethics and transparency, right? And obviously, when we're talking about AI, we're talking about very data-rich entities on the other side, right, that have a lot of data. Now, when an automated decision is taken about us, now what is an automated decision taken about us? When say I apply for a job, right? I put in my application, but on the other side, there is an AI entity scrutinizing my application, goes through my qualifications, goes through my experience, goes through even my race, my gender, my background, caste, whatever it is, right? That AI entity makes a decision alone as to whether I should get the job or not, right? That is an automated decision. Now, do I have a right to know who has made my decision, whether a person from that company has made a decision, or if the company has used AI technology to make a decision regarding my recruitment, right? And this is where the European Union has progressed one step ahead, right? In their new law, and all of us have heard of the GDPR, which is the new European Union data protection regulations that came in May this year, right? A lot of us, have been struggling and getting our compliance in check and all if we have any nexus to the EU. But there is a point there that says that if a person is subject to a decision made by automated means, that is, where there is no human intervention, that person has a right to request for the logic or for the rationale behind the decision, has a right to object against the decision, and has a right to request human intervention with respect to that particular decision, right? This is something we don't have in India today. It's something we may contemplate, but we don't have this in place, right? And this is where, again, why is it an ethics and a transparency issue? Because this is where your discrimination could set in. This is where profiling could take place, right? Now, if there are certain prejudices by a particular programmer or by a particular group of individuals sitting in a company handling a recruitment process, right? Who's to show that that does not trickle down to the AI itself when making that particular decision, right? Essentially, AI, to a large extent, also represents the thought process of the programmer, of the user, right? And such prejudices may even extend to automated decisions. So this is, of course, another consideration. Also, when we're talking about data-rich companies, one concept today, which the GDPR has brought in for the EU, and it's as most of you may know, we have a draft privacy law that may come into force in the next year or two. It's been released by MeitY for public consultation. It's set to replace the current existing privacy law regime, which in fairness is very basic, but compliance with can't be boasted too much. But what this new law does, similar to the GDPR, it talks about data portability, right? Now, if I'm a user on a particular platform, right, whether an e-commerce platform or a digital streaming platform, and if I want to shift to another platform, right, e-commerce or digital streaming, whatever it is, I can request for my entire set of data to be transferred from the first platform to the second platform. Now that includes data that the platform has inferred, derived, generated as a result of my relationship, right? So if you have a video streaming platform that already knows what I watch and is already suggesting to me what I should watch, what this law would do is that this law would say that if I want to shift to another platform, the first platform who I'm already with has to send all that data to the new platform. And the new platform is set to benefit from all of this data because they will be able to give me my customer experience right from day one, right? It's not actually going to be like signing up on a new platform where they have to take my preferences, where they have to ask me what I like to watch, where they have to monitor my watching for a few days before they can recommend anything. It's not like that, right? So in a drive to keep customer experience, this is one concept that has been proposed. And on one hand, you have a customer who's happy because there's not going to be too much of an issue in shifting, because you shift from probably an Amazon to a Flipkart, or from one platform to another. They already know what you like to look at online, whether you like to look at shoes or laptops or whatever it is, and they'll make appropriate suggestions for you. It'll also help in targeted advertising, right? So all of these are transparency issues, ethical issues involved. And what has been suggested also is that the law can't regulate everything, right? And I think this was a discussion that some of us are having offline. There can't be over-regulation to the point where it stifles innovation, right? But what can happen is that ethics and transparency needs to start from a very ground root level, right? In implementing these kind of things, solely to give comfort and protection to the consumer, right? The second overall aspect I want to deal with is a liability issue. I think this may be of a little more interest to you, from your contracts and data, right? Now let's take some very live examples, right? Now when somebody is manufacturing a product, selling a product, there is an implied duty of care that has to be taken, right, by the manufacturer, by the seller, right? But when it's an AI delivering a service, right, how do you take this standard duty of care into consideration, right? What do you do in the case of a negligence? If some of you all have heard, there's a term called tort. A tort is essentially a civil wrong, right? It covers things like negligence and so on and so forth, right? So when someone is essentially negligent in rolling out a service or rolling out a product through AI, who do you put the liability on there, right? Who does the liability fall on? That is the main question, right? Now, we already spoken about legal personality, and I think the first step is, once we have clarity on the legal personality issue, a lot of these issues will fall in line, and we'll have some clarity on them as well. But as of today, if there is civil liability that needs to be imposed, right? And what is your civil liability? Civil liability is merely seeking compensation from an AI entity, right? Say very simple. I'll keep it very simple here. Say there's a breach of a contract. You're supposed to be supplied certain products within certain number of days. That does not happen. Your business is affected. Your business operations are stifled, right? You would want to seek compensation from your vendor, right? Now, if you have an AI entity you're dealing with on the other side, what is your recourse? How do you sue an AI entity who's not even a person under the law? How do you take them to court? How do you get any kind of recourse against them? How do you ask them to pay when they don't have assets? How do you ask them to pay when they don't have a bank account, right? You're up against a brick wall in essence, right? So again, this is an issue when it comes to liability. How do you enforce something against an AI? And there are 2 or 3 schools of thought on this. Of course, not in India, but they've developed in the US, which I'll tell you about, right? When imposing, now what happens, let's move on first to criminal liability. Now what happens if there's bodily hurt caused? Say you have AI, you have robotics working in employment, right? Loading goods onto something, or directly interfacing with customers in a shop, right? Where there is actual human engagement, right? Either within the company or with customers, right? Now say there is some bodily injury that's caused. Say there's perhaps even a death caused, right? How is criminal liability imposed on a robot, on an AI entity, right? Again, it's not as simple as picking it up and putting it in jail. I mean, that's not something that's going to happen, right? It's how do you go against something like that? So there are 2 or 3 schools of thought on this, right? One is called the perpetrator via another theory, where it says that in essence, the perpetrator is the user or the programmer of the AI entity, right? And the perpetrator or the user, or the programmer of the AI entity intends on committing a crime, and what he or she does not do himself does through the AI entity, right? And that's where you put the criminal liability onto the programmer of the AI, right? This happens a lot with respect to company law, right? Where you go again, there's a concept called lifting the corporate veil, is where you go against the company, right? But you go against the officers in charge, the executives in charge, because you need to hold certain, they're called officers in charge. You hold the officers in charge of the company liable for certain acts of the company, right? Because essentially they are the ones making the decisions on behalf of the company. So similarly here, you have the programmer who's doing something via the AI entity. So this is known as the perpetrator via another concept. Another one is the natural probable consequence. Now this is something where there is no intent. In criminal law, we have something called mens rea, which is basically in addition to the act, there has to be intent, right? If there's no intent, then it's a civil wrong. It's a civil action, not a criminal action. And that is how we differentiate between civil and criminal, right? That is the foundation for civil and criminal law. Now, if there is no intent at all, then it's just something that could happen in due course. Like I said, where there's engagement, right, between humans and AI, where there's a human interaction and something goes wrong. If there's no intent, then that's not something you can impose criminal liability on, right? And another one is, of course, direct liability. Now, I just want to go back where Elon Musk actually said that, one of the possible ends to the world is AI instigated warfare, right? Which means that AI is developing so fast and so rapid that they are starting to develop emotions, sentiments, intent. And I focus on the word intent here as well, right? Feelings of their own, right? Because this is important, because tomorrow, if things are taken into their own hands, we don't know where things are heading, right? Today we can say, fine, we're not at a stage where we can attribute the AI entity liable for a particular act. We'll put the liability on the programmer or the entity or the company operating the AI. But tomorrow, an AI could have intent of its own, right? I think we're heading to that stage as well. So this is one of the models that are considered, right? Where there is a direct liability on an AI. Now, if we go to the punishments, this I think is a little humorous, but very relevant, right? There's something called capital punishment. Now, actually let your imagination go wild. It's literally what you are reading. How do you apply capital punishment to an AI? Again, this school of thought again comes, from the US, where they basically say you kill the AI, you unplug it, it's done, right? Imprisonment, basically you give it a timeout, you pull the plug for a while. Community service and fines is essentially where you take the AI out of its role, which it does on an everyday basis, and you make it serve the community, right? Serve the government, the less fortunate, various things like that. Our traditional perception of what community service is, right? So these are possible solutions that have been given. Of course, they're all theoretical today. We don't have the jurisprudence. We don't have matters that have gone to court and been adjudicated on for us to rely on today. But these are very initial issues, but it gets us thinking as to where and at what stage we can apply these various issues, right? And these thought processes. Again, I'm not going to spend time on the recommendations. I think my colleagues have already covered it. From a consumer angle and from a consumer engagement perspective, it's great that a marketplace and data exchanges have been recommended. I think it's been thought of, it's been recommended in the fintech sector as well, regulatory sandboxes. And while there are those incentives and closed environments for healthy data exchanges, I think it will only help the industry to grow, overall bettering customer experience. Of course, similar in the banking space, there is a person dedicated for grievances. There's also been an ombudsman dedicated for grievances. Basically, what this entails is that whenever a consumer is dealing with an AI on the other side, no matter what it may be, there has to be an ombudsman appointed for any grievances. So this goes to show that there is contemplation that there cannot be isolated interaction between an AI and a human. There should be an option for human intervention, is essentially the point here, right? And then of course BIS standards, data and tax policies follow, which will overall help the ecosystem, where we want it to go and the overall consumer experience. So essentially, I mean, in essence, and to conclude, we're at a stage where the law is trying its best to catch up. Technology is sprinting a 100-meter sprint. Law is doing a jog in a 10K marathon, right? I think we're at that phase. But we would need to wait. We would need to let the law evolve, to help the ecosystem grow, to encourage innovation, for incentives, data, tax, to help the startups and all of that. And on the other side, to obviously help the overall consumers and consumer interest, right? I think that balance always has to be kept. Just to give you a couple of examples on how laws have actually caught up, and it's not a no-win situation. It has happened. I'll give you an example, our stamping laws, and you all know what stamp duty is. Stamp duty is the tax or the duty that you pay the government when you sign a contract or any instrument, right? Earlier, and these are laws from the late 1800s, the early 1900s, where there was no question of electronic documents, PDFs or anything, right? But today our stamping laws have been amended to actually provide for electronic documents, which technically means that even if a contract is executed online, even if a contract is signed online between someone in India and someone in the US, and if it just stays on a computer, is not even printed out, technically you still need to pay stamp duty on that. So the law has been amended to cover these sort of situations. Another very common example is e-commerce. 10, 12 years ago, nobody knew where e-commerce would go. And now the government has come together, and we've heard of the e-commerce policy, and they're taking consultation, and how various things need to be consolidated to help the industry grow and things like that. So like this, the AI legal and regulatory ecosystem would also have to develop. And that should, just to give you an example, and I'll actually conclude on this note, that there is hope, is that in South Korea, right? South Korea has amended their tax laws to provide for a specific robot tax. Now, what is a robot tax? A robot tax is because robotics is taking a large part of employment and displacing a lot of employees and taking away their salaries, right? It's sort of an additional tax that is imposed by the South Korean government on these companies who are using AI. So it's a form of a deterrent basically, but this is specifically for AI robotics. So again, this is something which is very exciting. It excites all of us, and we're hoping for not only the AI technology system to grow and to foster, but also the legal and regulatory system to facilitate that growth. So thank you.